Hello and welcome to Cincinnati Soccer Talk, brought to you by your favorite anxiety and heartburn medicine out of the Nick Superling Studios. This is your host, Brian Weigel, welcoming you to episode 208. We got a great show for you guys. We're going to have special guest Nipun Chopra on here in a minute, but let's welcome in the crew of characters for this evening's show. My favorite best buddy in the whole wide world, new best buddy, beer-drinking mad tree fiend, love him to death, Clay Winstead. How we doing, pal?
I am excited to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
And I am also joined by my buddy, Jeff Warner.
Hey, guys. How are you? Always a pleasure.
And apparently I have a special guest here tonight, too, on the live episode of Cincinnati Soccer Talk. This is my precious daughter, Lily, who decided to walk out of her bedroom unannounced, and mommy is not paying attention. So we're going to have to deal with that at some point. So, guys, how are we doing on this very fine evening? We've had a lot to go on. You guys hanging out pretty well with all things considered going on?
Yeah, I don't know about you, but it felt like one of the first normal weekends I've had since early March. I mean, I woke up early Saturday morning, earlier than I have in previous quarantine days, and I got some beer out of the fridge, and I got a voice call with a bunch of other soccer fans, and I watched soccer for the first time since the Atlanta United match. So, yeah, that was pretty great. I did that Saturday and Sunday morning, and it felt normal for once. It was kind of nice.
Got a haircut on Friday, watched soccer on Saturday, so I felt like a human being.
Yeah, this is definitely that first time where it was easy to forget some of the stuff. Things were reopening. People were getting haircuts. I saw, what was that? The lines at Sports Clips were like 3 to 4 hours each. It was wild.
Right.
How was it?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, that was something fun. Guys, glad to have you all here on the show. As I said, we're here to inform, connect, and entertain. We've had a lot of questions lately, I know, with the Bundesliga returning, with a lot of Major League Soccer rumors out there, USL as well. We wanted to inform everybody about the whole procedure and policies and what's going to need to take place. You saw Major League Baseball out there releasing a 67-page document highlighting all the safety issues that they are going to have to address in the next month. So we kind of want to go through all what might have to happen to get soccer back, whether it's with fans, without fans. So we're going to all discuss that tonight. So without further ado, before we bring in Nipun here, I just want to give you guys a quick thought. There's a lot of things that you may agree with, may not agree with, but we're here as critics. We're here to discuss things. We're not here as enemies. If you guys disagree with something, please feel free to call. We're going to have our phone lines open up later. If you have any questions, concerns, please let us know. That's the one thing we all want to talk about. So, so we're here to kind of give our thoughts, help educate, debate, connect. We're all not going to agree with everything, but, we're here to discuss these things as fans of the club and of our favorite sports. So without further ado, let's welcome in my favorite doctor, my doctor at D2, Nipun Chopra of SockTakes.com. Nipun, how you doing, sir?
Brian, genuine pleasure to be on with you and Clay and Jeff. Thank you for having me on. Thanks for Nick for doing all this in the background. Deserves so much credit. Great to be on with you guys. I feel like you only bring me on to antagonize your fans, because last time I was on, I was talking about Tommy Heineman, and I know that didn't go down really well. So now let's talk about getting back to playing soccer with COVID-19. I'm happy to be the one to titillate the audience.
Well, the one thing I love, and please, I want you to talk about Sock Takes briefly. The one thing I love about your website, and especially about your writing, is how informed, researched it is. You reference so many things in your articles to make your overall points.
Oh, thank you, Brian. That's very kind of you. Sock Takes is a website that was started by my dear friend Kevin Johnston and myself. He's the one that really deserves 99% of the credit for it. We write primarily about lower division soccer, but other writers also write about MLS and Liga MX, and sometimes I write about Man United. Nick and I haven't got to talk about Man United often enough recently, but sometimes I throw in a Pogba article in there as well.
Got to have Fulani as well. I always joke about referring to you as the Doctor of D2. You've been a big asset to the NASL, USL, but you cover a variety of things. But kind of give us a breakdown of your non-soccer profession and why I call you the Doctor of D2.
Yeah, I don't claim to be the Doctor of D2. I think it's a very kind nickname you gave me, but for full disclosure, that's not something that I go around sharing. But the reason you call me the Doctor of D2, I think, and you can correct me, is because I do have a PhD. In my day job, I'm a neuroscientist. I did my PhD work on Alzheimer's disease. I did my postdoctoral work on traumatic brain injury. Currently, I'm an assistant professor of biology at DePaul University. And the D2 part is because I write a lot about lower division soccer. I think that's why you call me the Doctor of D2, unless there's some nefarious joke in there that I missed.
Oh, man, how many times did we go back and forth when we were building our dream team under Alan Koch with all the former NASL players?
We went back and forth a lot. That was a good time. That was a good team that you guys built. That team with all the NASL stars. Obviously, Ledesma is the one that stands out of the bunch. But basically, you guys did a Galacticos version of a USL team.
It was something. We loved it. Now kind of getting into the nuts and bolts on why we have you here. You wrote, as I said, a tremendous piece on socktakes.com outlining, the hazards and, are we ready to return to have soccer in the United States? Can you give our listeners a kind of quick bullet points on your topics and how you went into, informing your opinions on this?
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. Look, I'll tell you. Let me start off with this. I think some of my opinions will irk some of your listeners, and that's okay. But I want to start off with the idea that I'm obsessed with Beautiful Game. I've been watching the Beautiful Game for years, and I mean decades. And it's my I put it almost as high up as my passion for biology and neuroscience. So I'm not someone that's coming into it as someone that has just got into soccer in the last 2 or 3 years because of Indy 11. I've been watching soccer since the mid-90s. I'm obsessed with it. So I want to say that. What my article says, getting into the article, it's taking a look at what is available to us and whether it is possible for us to return to soccer right now or in the near future. I think there's what we can agree, all of us can agree that in the long term, it has to come back. It's a mini economy that needs to carry on. Players need to get paid. Clubs need to survive. So all of that is what I start the article with. But I also outline why at this moment, based on my understanding of the situation, based on my research of it, we are not ready, unequivocally not ready to start playing professional soccer right now. That's the overall gist of the article.
So we're really happy to have you on. Thanks for breaking down for us. You're not shy in your piece about saying, you're not really comfortable with where we're at, as you mentioned. But we did see Germany and South Korea resume league play this past weekend. It's impossible to say how successful it's going to be, in regards to player safety, because, there's another game this afternoon. We don't know if anyone's going to test positive or negative from this weekend.
Yeah.
But are there any systems or practices in place that those countries have implemented that you think MLS should use if they resume play, or are you just uncomfortable with any return to play at this time?
That's a great question. And Germany is, we're already seeing Bundesliga this past weekend, right? It was a great experience. And for anyone that loves the game, everyone watched Bundesliga this weekend. Well, a lot of people watched Bundesliga this weekend. The thing that I want to draw your attention to is not what MLS can do in this moment, but it is a problem that exists above MLS and above Bundesliga. One of the reasons Bundesliga could return is Germany is currently performing about 950,000 tests a day. 950,000 COVID tests a day. Based on their population, which is significantly less than America, that is a level of testing that epidemiologists consider to be viable enough that if every single Bundesliga player got tested every day, it would only be 0.5% of their tests. So that was a long-winded way of saying that they have a crap ton of tests, which means that it is not an ethical issue for them to test their players. Let's look at American soccer. America is currently conducting, actually, just before we got on, I've been doing this every day pretty much, but just before we got on, I was looking up how many tests we're doing. In the last 5 days, the running average is about 355,000 tests a day. The Harvard Global Health Institute, this is something I cited in my article, recommended by May 15th, which is a date that's already expired, we should have been doing about 950,000 tests. So in a best case, again, long-winded way of saying, we are doing about a third of the tests we should be doing in the country. Not only that, certain states are doing way worse than other states, right? So there's a significant problem in America, which is the number of tests we're conducting. How does that translate to MLS? It means, and USL, by the way, as well. It means that if you're taking tests away from people who should be getting them, that is a significant ethical concern. If there's someone who is elderly, if there's someone who has a pre-existing condition, if someone is working as an emergency personnel, someone's working as a doctor, a nurse, they should be the priority to get the COVID tests. And if we start testing soccer players, especially given the fact that we are already way behind on testing, we're doing a third of the tests we should be doing, that is a significant concern. And I don't think that is a sustainable model right now.
Yeah, you mentioned Bundesliga. It was interesting to see some of the reaction over the weekend in relating to the product, relating to the quality of the football that was being presented to the public. We all understand why this is happening. We know it's all related to money. They're trying to recoup as much of the TV dollars as they can. We understand that. You can expound on that if you'd like, but wanted to get your opinion on just the product that was presented to us. They're assuming some level of risk. They're obviously doing it simply to recruit money and recoup money. And what they presented to us was essentially managers' instructions echoing off of metal seats, socially distanced goal celebrations. The reaction that I got from a lot of my American Twitter followers was, well, it's soccer. We missed it. It's better than nothing. We'll take it. It seemed like a lot of my European friends were a little more critical. But what was your feeling about the product that was delivered by Bundesliga over the weekend?
You mean the playing? You mean what we saw on the pitch, or do you mean the whole package?
Yeah, the aesthetics of the broadcast, the impact of playing in an empty stadium, but also, yes, you bring up a good point. The fact that the majority of these players are not fit, they're not sharp. You can address the quality of the football as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we're returning to play anytime soon, it has to be in empty stadiums. At least let me say it differently. The only leagues that can afford to do this are the top leagues, right? Because for Bundesliga, Premier League, and you hinted at this in your question, they are basically beholden to most of their money come from the media stuff, right? From the TV deals. Whereas with MLS and USL and American leagues, a significant amount of revenue comes from tickets. So the only leagues that can just afford to do this and not worry about it are the top leagues in Europe. Now, that means that they can go ahead and remove the absolute risk, which is having a bunch of people in the stadium. That allows them to do that. Now, does that mean that it takes away from the purity of the game? Yes. But in a moment where you're in a global pandemic, I think purism is just not a viable concept anymore. Everything that happens has to be innovation. I'll give you an example of this. One of my favorite, so going back to my love for the beautiful game, I've collaborated with a bunch of podcasters over the world, across the world. One of my favorites is Lawrence McKenna, who does this podcast called The Front Three. And they were talking about whether we should come back to playing football. And Lawrence, who is just a very innovative guy, talked about the idea of playing games in indoor stadiums and essentially, creating new different camera angles. Basically, his idea was, if you're going to take the game out of a stadium and if you're going to take the fans out of the stadium, this gives you an opportunity to innovate and to create new production ideas that you couldn't have engineered before. I think there's some truth to that. And I think I would like to see something like that. I don't agree with him that it should be in an indoor stadium, don't get me wrong, but I think this is an opportunity for leagues to innovate. And I think what they're doing instead is just dragging themselves over the line just to get those dollars or euros or whatever currency they're operating in.
Turning our attention more home to MLS and USL.
Yeah.
We do have a question for USL later, but we do know that MLS has a plan that's been being discussed at the very least about hosting some training and maybe a tournament or at least part of the season in Florida to start. So there's a lot of questions about that. First, we do know that Harvard has released a study recently saying that heat and humidity might offer like a modest reduction in the transmission rate from coronavirus. It's possibly to the rate of like 0.5 along with social distancing. With that information, MLS is looking to maybe take advantage of that. And per the Harvard's metrics, Florida would need to be testing about 106,000 people per week. And it looks like they're now averaging around 123,000 per week with a current capacity to test up to maybe over 200,000. Do you think with that elevated baseline risk level that pro leagues are smart in locating in a state where they can use that weather, and then also meet those necessary benchmarks?
I think so. So there are multiple really interesting sub-questions to your question. Let's start with the first one, which is the part about the humidity and the temperature. That is based essentially on data from SARS-CoV-1, aka the SARS epidemic of 2003, which showed a seasonality factor, a slight seasonality factor. The truth is, we don't know for sure that this is going to happen with SARS-CoV-2. We don't know if this virus is going to behave exactly the way its cousin did. I'll give you a point to consider. A close cousin of SARS-CoV-2 is the virus that we're dealing with right now. Another close cousin of this virus is the virus that caused the Middle East respiratory syndrome called MERS in 2014. And as you guys may recognize, it's pretty hot in the Middle East. It's pretty hot in the Middle East in the summer, and there was no change in the viral dynamics at that time. So the truth is, we don't know. That is just a prediction that we are working with, and I think it would be dangerous to make a decision about returning to soccer based on what is an unknown. I would categorize it as unknown right now. About Florida, I think. So I have to admit, I don't know I haven't looked at the data closely enough to know what's going on in terms of testing in Florida. But it is an interesting case study in how different counties dealt with the outbreak. For anyone who's in Florida, they'll know the exact counties. But there were adjacent counties that were that locked down. Other counties didn't, and they had a totally disparate breakout or number of deaths. I think is the end point there. But what I'm getting at is that, when we look at these numbers, there's actually a lot of digging into the data that we have to do that I haven't done. So I'm not qualified enough to give you an exact answer about Florida. But I do want to go back to the bit about, I think what you're really asking about is what MLS is planning to do. And the reason I laughed when you said that is because I don't think MLS knows what their plan is. So, and I talked about this in my article. Let's take a hypothetical example. Just statistically, it is guaranteed some players going to get COVID-19 at some point if the season starts. What is MLS's plan? Are they going to sequester that one player? Are they going to sequester the whole team? Do you cancel that game day? Do you sequester every referee he was exposed to? How far back do you go? These are questions that I don't think MLS has reckoned with yet. And if they were truly reckoning with them, I don't think they would be talking about returning to train, because training poses some of those same risks. If you're in the same locker room, right? If you're in the same space, unless you know exactly what your plan is to deal with the eventual, undeniable, inescapable reality of having a COVID-19 positive player, you should not be returning to playing soccer. And I don't think MLS, and certainly not USL, have a plan that convinces me that they know what they're going to do.
So you believe the Florida plan is more based on optimism of certain testing benchmarks, or potential seasonality and stuff like that?
I think it's probably based. So again, I don't know the data about Florida specifically, but I know that the humidity and the temperature part is based on modeling that reflects the behavior of SARS, the first SARS virus, which was in 2003, which did kind of die off in the summer. And by the way, flu viruses do this every year, right? Flu epidemic dies off in the summer, comes back up. So it's based on that sort of modeling.
And I don't want to feel like we're necessarily piling on here, but there's another issue of we're sending these players into Florida on 2 weeks of training before they hit the Sunshine State. Are there any concerns for players could be an increase for injuries playing in that heat and humidity with less fitness, as well as the mental state?
I think so.
Could be affected by players potentially being, taken away from their families? Do you see that as
I think that's a great
potential
question.
consequence?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the second part is incredibly important, and I applaud you for talking about that. That basically removing the players from their families and forcing them to be in enclosed space for a couple, however long the season, 2-3 months that they try to squeeze the games into, has significant mental health challenges, especially when players have to deal with, again, inescapable statistical reality that some players' family members going to get sick. What are you going to do to that player? Are they allowed to go home? Are they allowed to come back if they go home? These are questions that need to be dealt with. I thought the first part about injuries, honestly, that is something that is navigable. And what I mean by that is we have to remember that all the players are going to be at the same basal level of lack of fitness. So it's going to be like the start of the season. The games aren't going to be high throughput. They're not going to be 80 miles an hour. Players will need a couple of weeks to get up to speed. But because all the players are in a similar boat, I think the injury issue is something that doesn't bother me as much as the COVID-19 related and mental health, which you correctly point out, those issues as much.
Obviously, as we're discussing, the health and safety aspect, the life and death aspect of this should be paramount. Again, just to kind of go in a different direction, where there's a big focus right now with reopening the economy for obvious reasons, and there's that risk reward that we're dealing with. In terms of MLS, a league that needs every financial advantage it can get, unlike some of the other European leagues or leagues throughout the world, MLS is working on a new TV contract. Their financial situation might be a little different. Certainly, it's much different than the other major professional sports in this country. So the economic reality and that risk reward, right? That's where the MLS is trying to figure out where that risk reward is. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the MLS's financial situation, and where we're talking about reopening businesses throughout the country? This is a business as well that wants to get reopened, that wants to be able to pay its employees. There's that aspect as well. And it's difficult to ask that question because obviously the health aspect should be paramount. But we need to deal with that as well, because we have the quality of life issue for not the players as much, but the staff, the team employees, and all of those people, and they need to play matches to make money.
Yeah. So you're probably not going to like my answer, and I think this is where people get annoyed with me on social media. For me, this is not it's not a difficult answer. For me, if you're asking me to decide between the financial health of someone that paid $250 million to get a professional soccer team versus someone that makes $60,000, $50,000, $40,000 a year, or actually MLS, I was talking USL, but MLS makes, $100,000 a year, or the support staff make $45,000 a year, it's a no-brainer. I go with the latter every day of the week. For me, it is the responsibility of the owners to absorb this loss and to basically decide 2020 is a season that they lost more money than they expected to. But I do not see this as a scenario where they should be forcing players and staff to get back to work, to risk getting sick or getting their family members sick because they are inconvenienced by a couple million, which for them means absolutely nothing. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I know this is not going to make fiscal conservatives happy, but you asked for my opinion, and that's my opinion.
And I tend to be, honestly, I tend to agree. And I think, like all of us, we're kind of looking at all sides of this discussion, and I've kind of wavered back and forth on it. But I'm watching Bundesliga over the weekend, and you can kind of offer your thoughts as well. As a fan of this game, I'm watching that, and I'm considering the risks, and I'm watching them playing in an empty stadium, and I'm seeing the players and staff on the bench separated and people with masks. And I'm thinking,
yeah,
as a fan, as desperate as I am to have football back, I can wait. If they told me, and I'd like your response to this, if they told you could wait till 2021 at least, but you knew that if you shut things down for 2020 and you waited, and you were able to come back and soccer would be 100% back to normal whenever you did come back, I would be willing to wait. Would you be willing to wait for that as a fan?
Thank you for saying that. I agree with you 100%. Look, I tend to be pretty pessimistic in my life in general, but I want to recognize the fact that, as a species, we've been through this before. We've been through much worse. We've been through a bubonic plague. We've been through, parts of the world have been through Ebola. A type of Ebola kills 90% of healthy people that it infects. So 9 out of 10 healthy people die. We've been through the 1918 pandemic, where a third of the entire world became positive with influenza A, H1N1. Based on the estimate that you use, between 20 and 100 million people died a century ago. And what happened? The 20s, and as a civilization, we came back roaring, stronger, having learned lessons. And I think that's how we should be thinking about this. That this is not, people keep asking, are we ever going to go back to normal? Are we ever going to go back to normal? Yeah, it may not be exactly the same normal that you had before, but it's going to be normal. We'll have a vaccine. We'll have treatment. We won't be beat by this virus forever. So coming back to your question, I 100% unequivocally agree with you. For me, this season should be written off with the promise that, hey, by 2021, sometime in 2021, we are going to be close to ready to come back to get back to normal and to enjoy the game with our friends. It may not be 35,000 people sitting at once. It may start with only half the stadium full, but we'll get there as the vaccines get better, as more people get vaccinated, as herd immunity takes place. We'll be back to normal. So absolutely, we need to buy time, and we cannot rush back into this for the greed of a few people.
Kind of returning our focus to the here and now, while I'm very moved by your opinion on this, there are still going to be calls in the meantime for some stuff to resume. We've talked about MLS a lot, but you did mention briefly earlier about USL and how the finances are a little more precarious there because players are making less money. You actually broke some news tonight about the counter proposal of the USL Players Association to the USL. Can you give us an explanation on what's going on with those negotiations?
Sure thing. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about USL.
Of course, we haven't forgotten you.
What's since you crushed our league, right? Wasn't that
Yes.
Just a quick summary of what's happened until today. Obviously, with anyone that's you guys know, you guys have been in USL before. You know that the league isn't doing so great financially, and the league itself has been generating revenue since 2014. But as I reported about 5 months ago, a lot of that revenue is actually being taken by New Rock, which is the ownership behind USL as an entity. And we know that the owners themselves are hemorrhaging money as they do in lower division soccer, which is just a reality. So what happened after COVID-19 is that the USL, based on conversation with owners and the league, came to the USL Players Association and basically asked them to take a significant pay cut for all the players across the board. This happened about 3 weeks ago. Sorry, I may have the timeline off, but 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the USL Players Association has been taking their time, doing their due diligence. They've been talking to, they've been talking to attorneys. They've been talking to supporter groups. They've been talking to, of course, the players themselves. Have been having discussions. And today, they submitted a proposal back to USL, which basically stands up for the rights of the players. And it says, look, we understand that stuff is going down, and we understand that, this is a horrible situation, but we're willing to take a 10% pay cut, but it'll only be for the players that make above $2,000 a month, and it'll only be on the amount they make above $2,000 a month. So to put it simply, if someone makes $2,100 a month, they will basically be putting $10 aside towards this fund that USL wants to create, or basically whatever they want to use that money for. That was one thing they said. Another thing they said was that it is responsible, that the league has to help the clubs, because it is not the responsibility of the players to help the clubs survive the financial crash. It is the responsibility of the league, especially since it is a true franchise model. People kind of always conflate this. MLS is not really a recognized franchisor, whereas USL is a franchisor. USL is a franchisor. Every team is a franchisee. So it's a true franchisor model. So of ownership. That's the second thing they said. And the third thing they said, actually they said a lot more, but these are the three things I tweeted about. The third thing they said was that next season, they want all the players to have a minimum salary of at least $20,000 a year. I know that seems really low, guys, but you have to recognize that there are players who are basically playing for clubs for absolutely nothing, for basically word of mouth contracts that are basically per diems. And I wrote an article about what happened at Hartford last year, where there were this player who was playing for 3 months on essentially where he was just getting paid for his meals, and then eventually they gave him a contract. But there are players that are living below the poverty level who are playing in USL. So while a $20,000 a year contract doesn't sound like a lot of money, it is absolutely huge that the USL can throw that into negotiations and say we need a minimum salary.
So what are the differences in collective bargaining between USL and MLS players? We know MLS Players Association is recognized by the league. Is the USLPA recognized as well?
USLPA has been recognized by the league, but it is not a completely ratified scenario between the two of them yet. And I have to admit that that is the extent of my knowledge in terms of how the collective bargaining agreement works between USL and USLPA.
It's okay. We thank you for your insight at all. We've talked a lot about the MLS plan. If you could put a percentage chance of the USL having a 2020 season, where would you put it?
Unfortunately, I would put it at 50-50. I think it should be, I wish I could say 1% chance that they play again, but I think it's a 50-50 at this point. I think the owners want to play. I think the league wants to play. I think some of the players want to play, probably because they are in a scenario where it's being posed to them as, if you don't play, you're not going to get paid. And I think in that scenario, you force players to play. So I think it's a 50-50. I wish it was less, but that's what I think it is. Yeah.
Well, Nipun, I don't want to keep you too long, pal. I know you got a beautiful bride, I'm sure, trying to get you back and watch Friends or something on Netflix. We have a real quick listener question here from Soccer Goose. I think you know this gentleman. At the Soccer Goose.
Great guy.
Very good guy. Good hair. Let's say eventually, say in the fall, fans are allowed to attend matches. What are the measures you would like to see put in place to protect fans' health?
Yeah, so great question from Ben. Really nice guy, really a person that really thinks about issues in lower division soccer very deeply and very in a very balanced way. And I really appreciate his question here. If we do return, I mean, we need to basically follow CDC guidelines. And what I mean by that is don't listen to what the political folks tell you about, not wearing masks, which is one of the dumbest things I've honestly heard, which is the idea that if you wear masks, you risk getting more infected. Unbelievably dumb. But so wear masks, practice social distancing, wash your hands, like no standing around and waiting after games to shake hands with players. Try not to. If you're in the stadium, instead of having a full section like the Brickyard Battalion, taking Indy 11 as an example, you have people spaced out. You force people to sit separately. When you go to the concession stand, make sure you're practicing social distancing. Like basically, smart things that we are doing now. You put that into a stadium and recognize that when you are in an enclosed stadium, the chances of spread are greater. What we do is we try to increase the number of people we let into the stadium slowly but surely, as opposed to letting, half the stadium full the very first day, which is a bad idea. So it has to be a collaborative effort. It will, and I guarantee it will be, one step forward, two steps back, because someone will get sick, something will happen. And we'll have to learn from that and move on from that. Like I said earlier, this is not the first time our civilization has dealt with something like this. We can get over it, and we will. But I strongly encourage MLS and USL to just forget about the 2020 season, keep playing their players, keep paying their staff, and recognize that a couple of billion loss for a billionaire is something that will be that should not be the priority. And the priority should be the health and the safety of players, staff who are being paid 1 millionth of what they're making.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nipun, thank you so much for coming on. I personally have this great feelings towards you, especially because you had the work with your Alzheimer's earlier in your career, and I had lost my grandfather honestly almost exactly a year ago to Alzheimer's, and it's a big thing in my life, and I've always trusted your judgment and your opinions on these medical matters, and there's so much information out there. I think it's refreshing to hear somebody who knows a lot, who can offer a detailed opinion as yours. So thank you so much for coming on and enlightening the listeners of Cincinnati Soccer Talk.
Gentlemen, genuine pleasure. Thank you for some great questions, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this and to talk about USL as well. I wish you all the best, and I wish safety and good health for you and your loved ones.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Have a good one. All right, guys, that was a great interview with Nipun Chopra of Sock Takes. A lot to digest there, and this is a very difficult scenario still. It's not going to be easy, no matter what we hear on Twitter saying, okay, we're going to be open in the end of May. We can play games in June. There's so much that goes into these matters. And Clay, hearing these words from Nipun, I think you asked that question about a 50-50 chance. Just medically speaking, do you think that's 50-50, or would you put it a little bit higher, lower? What's your thoughts on that?
The actual chances of a return to play, I mean, I don't know as much about USL. So I'm more inclined to believe what he says about that in particular, because he's been covering it on talktakes.com. Speaking from what I know more about MLS and just knowing American sports in general, I think the likelihood of a season happening is higher. I think probably 60-40, maybe 70-30 of MLS returning. I just know that ownership, and I will admit, even some players and a lot of fans want to return and see the game, because it's not like the NBA, where they finish most of their season and maybe they can squeeze in a couple weeks of playoffs real quick and make it happen. And they basically, had their year. MLS only played 2 games. So a lot of people and a lot of powerful and people with a lot of money on their line are really itchy to get this going. So I think the chances of it returning, whether or not they should, is high.
And you kind of took the question I was going to give to Jeff out of my mouth there. I was going to ask him about the differences between the leagues in, I think, France canceling versus MLS wanting to continue the 28 to 28 games they played versus the 2. But in the realities, Jeff, do you think that this is going to? Do you think that there will be a groundswell from the players to want to continue to play, or do you think this will be more ownership, league driven?
We'll have to see how the players are perceiving this, because one of the big issues and one of the reasons why the Premier League has continued to waver week after week on their decision and their plan is that there's clearly been some dissension, some concern among the players for not just their own health and safety, but the health and safety of their families, and also the game day staff and so forth. We haven't heard a whole lot of that come out of MLS, although we have had a few of our players here comment. I know Spencer Ritchie has been, on more than one occasion, has been very vocal about this. I think the chances of coming back to play are high, unless something else occurs. If we stay on the track that we're on right now, where the curve is flattening, so far reopening has gone well, we're seeing numbers drop in a lot of areas. However, it's a really precarious situation. And if social distancing and relaxing of the rules does not go well and we have a second surge, it all depends on when that happens and to what extent. If we stay on the track that we're on right now, I can see some semblance of a season for all of the major professional sports in America. I don't have any idea on what that's going to look like, but it's really precarious. This is a virus; it's a living thing, and you can try to control it, but we'll have to see. But I think, as Clay said, every effort will be made. We know that. To put some semblance of a season together, whatever that might look like.
It's incredible how much is going into, and then now you're hearing that like Disney World's contemplating or Hollywood Studios reopening. I think Holiday World in Indiana is opening in less than a month. It's incredible how fast some of these things are changing and happening every day. 4 days ago when Nipun's story came out on the 14th, and now looking at the 18th today when the governor of New York says, we have so many, double the amount of tests than people that we can test at them, that we need people to come forward and get tested. So it's very interesting to see how this is all changing and adapting. And I feel like this situation changes, every day, and it'll be, a completely different approach a week from now when we sit down. So let's before we kind of get into our next topics here, we do want to thank all of our great supporters of Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Big shout out to all you tremendous supporters, including King's Hammer and Tim Bronsel. We got Tom Rose, Matt Adamchick, Mike Hudson, Brian Malone, Jamie Smed, Jonas Tom, Jack Emery, Mike Bowman, Kathleen Francis, Matt Emholt, Matthew Long, Joe Kaling, and Tara Mullins. Thank you all so much for your support. And to learn how you can support CST, head over to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. So, we were discussing it briefly in the discussions with Nipun about Major League Soccer's reported path to play. And of course, I'm sure you've heard over the past week, they're looking at locating everybody down to Orlando, to Orange County, Florida, just south of Orlando, at the Disney's ESPN's Wide World of Sports at Disney. Basically, it'll be a 3 to 4 week preseason followed by approximately 6 weeks worth of matches. All teams will be located in one spot at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort. The league did come out and say, or reports, I guess, said testing players about every 2 to 3 days, as well as all game days. And then the key, the players are going to be quarantined away from their families for that stage. That's mind-blowing to me, especially because some players out there are going to be having kids soon. Harris Madunan, and I think his wife is, or spouse is due in the next month. So what will happen with him? So there's so many questions out there. Is this going to be a regular season? Is it going to be a standalone event? We mentioned it. Is there going to be are we going to have the CBA at some point? What's going to happen with the players' salaries? What do we do with at-risk players? I think somebody brought up Jordan Morris. He has type 1 diabetes. What are we going to do with him? He's a superstar. Is he going to sit out? Are you going to pay him? What do we do there? So there's so many questions. Of course, Jeff, you mentioned it in the interview. What's the product going to look like on the field and playing in a small stadium? So there's so many things out there that we have questions about. So Jeff, when you heard of all these things, what was your initial take on the plans, especially how it could relate to the players, their salaries, and then even being away from their families for 2-3 months?
I think my take has kind of been kind of the same all along. We want to see sports, right? We want to see MLS. We want to see FC Cincinnati play. There's no question about that. Watching Bundesliga this weekend, you watch the product that's being presented, and my thoughts watching that were, if they can make clearly, as they're willing to make all of these concessions, they're willing to go through all these safety protocols, they're willing to make all of these revisions, and there's obviously a high reward, and we know what that is. It's the TV dollar for the most part. It means more to some clubs than it does to others, but there's a lot of effort being put forth to present some form of their sport to the public, because they know how much money potentially could be lost if they don't. And I'm watching Bundesliga and I'm thinking, if they can make this much money, if there's a significant financial gain to be had by presenting that level of product to the public, just that, I'll never question why sports makes money. And seeing people so eager to consume just the basic, just bare bones semblance of the sport that they love, they're willing to consume it. I'll never question why sports makes the money that it does, because people will take essentially whatever they want to throw at them. And if MLS throws this World Cup style tournament in Florida, people will go crazy for it.
And what do you say the cost of not playing the whole season? I mean, I think that could be, you look at like the AHL or canceling the NBDL, that's, do you view MLS in less terms with them canceling the season, or them playing in an empty stadium in Florida at a high school athletic facility, essentially?
Well, again, that's the risk reward. We certainly here do not want FC Cincinnati financially impacted to the point where it impacts anything related to the new stadium, to the point where it impacts the investment that can be made to the club. Nipun kind of addressed that, though. We're talking about, in many cases, we're talking about owners that are worth in the billions. But I'm sensitive to that because I don't want to see anyone's job suffer. I don't want to see the stadium employees, the ticket people, the PR staff, the marketing staff suffer because they weren't able to play a season this year. But again, it's the risk and the reward. And I look at this and I'm not comfortable. I'm just not 100% comfortable with this. There's a lot of effort to kind of piecemeal all of this together just to make it happen. And I wonder, are you doing this because the fans so eagerly want to have MLS soccer this year, or you're doing this just because you need to recoup as many dollars as you possibly can? And it's probably the latter.
Yeah.
I'm just not comfortable with it. I don't know any other way to state it, although I understand the importance of playing because I'm sensitive to the fact of the financial impact, especially the lower level employees and staff and people that are really taking the biggest hit from this.
Yeah. One of my biggest fears is what I kind of mentioned to you in that question is the vision, the view of the league nationally. Is I think if we just didn't play a season would just absolutely nosedive. Now, would that change if Major League Baseball sits out, NBA doesn't come back for a year? Those are all different things. But, again, kind of what Spencer Ritchie said in an interview with Pat Brennan is, safety. There's so many factors. He said that, quote unquote, there's the medical side, which should obviously be priority one in this scenario. And then you have Harrison Dunanan coming out and saying, nobody knows what's going on. And then, we don't know what the date's going to be. He mentioned, if you go train by yourself at Mercy Health Training Center, it's the same kind of training at home, staying at home and training. It's nice you can go to the facility, but, seeing the other guys, but, is that still safe in this moment? Nipun even said that. So there's so many things about safety there. And then kind of going back to the salary, Clay, the impacts that these players are going to have, whether it's not playing or going to Florida. That's to me, that's the kicker. I'll address Spencer's comments here. Then you can kind of follow up on your thoughts on Spencer. He says, we are aware that the owners are getting crushed by this pandemic, and that's something that we are not being naive to, but also with that, it's hard because our CBA doesn't have the force majeure clause in it like some of these top leagues around the country. We're also not contractually obligated just to accept any pay reduction without a conversation, without a discussion as to what the rest of the season might look like. So if one of these quarantine tournaments were to happen in a selective market, then certainly players would be much less receptive to a pay reduction. So, Clay, first off, what's your thoughts on that? And then, do you think the players, say they play 6 weeks in Florida and that's it, do you think they should still have to take a pay cut?
I will say my sympathies, first and foremost, like Nipun, like Jeff, I think are with the players. I was enjoying myself Saturday and Sunday watching Bundesliga again. Even without fans, I was still getting into it. But a thought crossed my mind. Seeing one of the substitutes 6 feet away from his other teammates with a mask on. What am I going to do when the first player gets tested positive? And I thought, would it be worth it? And I think the answer in my gut was saying, I don't think so. If I'm these players, if I'm going to risk my health, if I'm not only potentially just, contracting COVID-19, but, putting myself away from my family, possibly getting hurt in Florida humidity and heat on a few weeks of training. I don't know why I would take a pay cut. I would want a bonus. I want hazard pay. I would want more. You're asking them. It feels like we're talking about gladiators in the Roman Colosseum. We're asking these people to put their I know it sounds severe, but at least their health, if not their lives, at risk to play for our entertainment.
Okay, I'm going to follow up with that, though, real quick.
Please.
So, and this is all about, I'm not your enemy, we're critiquing comments.
Let's do it.
People across the country are all going back to work.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are taking pay cuts, but all of them have that elevated baseline of exposure. What makes an athlete different?
See, I think I'm of the opinion that a lot of people shouldn't be going back to work right now. I don't think there's enough of a dip in testing nationwide. I don't think there's enough volume of testing for a lot of these people. I know a lot of people have to go to work. I know a lot of people are essential. I know the economy can't just shut down for a year and a half, and then re-jump like that. I know that's not possible. But I think even the people who are returning to work, it still might not be safe. I know it's not the case everywhere, but I'm seeing these photos of people at Standard Hall in Columbus, not social distancing, Holy Grail on the banks. And my first thought is, well, these waiters, these wait staff, these bartenders, these kitchen chefs are asked to go back to work. They can't say no because then they lose out on unemployment. And then dozens upon dozens of people are showing up, probably not supporting social distancing measures. And, it's unsafe. And you mentioned Jordan Morris. The COVID-19 isn't just something, even someone at my age, Jordan Morris's age, that you sit at home for 2 weeks, you have a bad cough, and then you're over it. It's potentially scarring your lung tissue. And if you have a condition like type 1 diabetes, that can make it more severe. So he's not looking at maybe a 2 weeks recovery. He's looking at maybe 3 months to a year where it's hard to run because you can't breathe that well. I'm not comfortable, like Jeff said, putting them at risk for my enjoyment.
There's a lot of factors.
I want soccer. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
want soccer back as quickly as we possibly can get it back, when it can come back 100% as it was. I want the world to get back to normal as quickly as possible, when it can get back to the normal that we knew pre-COVID-19. And maybe we never entirely go back to normal because of the lessons that we've learned through this. But we all love this sport and we all want it back as soon as possible. But if the next FC Cincinnati match that I see is in the stadium in the West End, I'm not going to complain, because hopefully I'll be sitting there with 26,000 other people, and we'll be having the time of our lives, and coronavirus will be in the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think
I'm just not comfortable with anything before that point. I'm not entirely comfortable, but you brought up the good point, and we talked about it before the show, Brian. Everyone deserves a chance to go back to work, regardless of what their profession is. Mm-hmm. That's the difficulty of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And we'll put a bow on this here. And it's all a risk assessment. It's not alarmism. It's a dedicated risk assessment. It's a calculation on how we can get back to, old normal. We'll say. I hate the phrase, but kind of get back to what we're used to. And it's does this jeopardize that more? Does it push that us returning to the West End? By returning now, does it push that out to summer versus spring of 2021? Now that being said, we're kind of living in an alternate universe right now. I feel like with everything going on, and there is going to need to be some adapting, and I'm sure we'll come across these topics a lot over the next couple months as we work to rebuild and see what happens with FC Cincinnati. So. Please feel free to send in your questions. We'll try to do a Q&A with listeners here in the foreseeable future with what your thoughts are, and please feel free to reach out to us. We've been getting blown up recently, my DMs, the show's DMs about different topics and all these things. So please feel free to reach out to us. There's I think last week I made a joke about beating a dead horse, but people are always asking this question, and that's why we're trying to give you guys as many avenues and viewpoints on this. So please disagree. Please reach out to us on this. So love to talk about it. A couple other pieces of news before we wrap up here. I know we're going a little late tonight. We did have some news about an FC Cincinnati head coaching search. It seems to be Jaap Stam seems to be coming right down that pipe with reports from Laurel Fowler as well as Tom Bogert of MLSsoccer.com. Gerard Notkamp, general manager Gerard Notkamp, has hinted that Jaap Stam is the main candidate, and appears that they have agreed to terms or are very, very, very close. There were rumors out there that there was a late candidate that came to the show, but don't believe that happened. We'll keep diving down and try to find a little bit more information on there for you. I think this club has been shooting high, and although we don't always get exactly what we want, we do get it. I think we should have a very good head coach coming up with Jaap Stam, and once that's all signed, seal delivered, we'll have a full show dedicated to Jaap. A couple other news: Jeff Burdings announced that there are about 1,500 deposits for club seating, so that's exciting. Roughly 2/3 of all club seats are spoken for, so we're excited to see what the rest of the stadium's looking like. But the high dollar seats, that looks to help FC Cincinnati keep building that stadium in the West End and maybe help fund the team this spring and summer. Also, some ticketing for all 2020 FC Cincinnati matches originally scheduled at Nippert that have been canceled or postponed, not rescheduled 8 weeks after the original date. Fans can seek a refund for those tickets or get a 10% application credit towards their ticket for the 2021 season. So that's all great and exciting things coming with FC Cincinnati. Now, the hot topic debate that we've all been looking for this evening. The seats designs of the West End Stadium. I know y'all been waiting 60 minutes to talk about the beautiful West End Stadium, the seat designs. The club rolled out a pretty cool little thing today with the fans have the opportunity to vote on the design of the interior of the stadium. So there are 4 different designs pitched to supporters. I know there's been a lot of comments about what could, would, should happen, and we can discuss that if you'd like to. But I think there are 4 solid options. There's basically the base color of the stadium is going to be navy blue seats, which are very attractive. The one option has the solid navy all the way around the bowl with a orange Gary in one of the sides across from the club section. Another is the navy, but with blue speckles kind of throughout the whole stadium. Not very aggressive with almost like a royal blue seat, speckle blue seats, but a little bit of a addition also with the Gary line on the sideline. The third option, which is honestly my favorite, is the gradient navy with blue. So it's almost like the upper level is more of the royal with the trickle down to the navy blue in the lower level. I want to say Vancouver has something similar like this. I could be getting it wrong, but I thought it was absolutely gorgeous, and that would be my vote. So if you have a chance to go vote for gradient navy with blue. And then the fourth option is speckled navy with blue, which is kind of like what the speckled Gary was earlier. A little bit more speckled blue throughout the stadium, but overall, these seem like fairly standard packages, seating packages. I'm sure they're getting a good discount the more blue they get, so that's cool. Except with the orange Gary. So, guys, Clay, I know you have the eye of an artist. What are your original thoughts on the speckled Gary or the solid navy Gary?
I kind of expected Gary to be included. I don't like the combination of royal blue and navy, which is why I picked the first option, where you have a
solid navy with orange Gary.
Yeah, exactly. Standard navy with the Gary, because I think orange and blue is such a great color combo that not enough sports teams utilize in the world, and we have it, and it's so great. I would love us to utilize it more. But for me, I'll be honest, I think a lot of people on Twitter agree with me. I was a little let down generally by the options. I was, you know what? Honestly, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium has just plain navy seats, and I don't hear anyone really mentioning it. So, but you give the option, you give the fans a choice. You're kind of excited. You hope for something creative, maybe a diverse set of options. And I didn't see a diverse set of options. We've had a lot of talks about this. I think a few people have got on my mentions. You could have just put Cincinnati in there. It's classic. It's easy. Or something that I have wanted this team to use for a long, long time: the waves of the Ohio River on the Cincinnati city flag. You can make it the royal blue if you want. You can make it orange for that great combo. I just think it's a iconic artistic feature of something that most Cincinnatians love. It identifies the city, identifies our culture, I think, and it doesn't hurt when you change a crest in 10 to 15 years. So, but I'll take what I can get. I'm just happy to think about the West End Stadium.
Yeah, our lion, winged lion, St. Mark the Evangelist lion, has a short shelf life, all things considered. Jeff, did any of these take your breath away?
Actually, no. And I'm going to give a shout out to, and if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, I apologize, Ryan. But Ryan Lammy on Twitter tweeted out the just FC Cincinnati lettering across the upper deck of seats. Very European, very traditional, very EPL, if you will. But I love the visual that went, and he mentioned it in his tweet. But when I looked at the picture he posted, my first visual was an aerial shot of downtown with that stadium lit up and FC Cincinnati. No lion logo that maybe somebody who's not familiar with the club has to interpret. No design in the seats that you may not even be able to make out from the air. You would see FC Cincinnati across that upper deck of seats, and it would be a phenomenal visual. And I'm a traditionalist, I admit, but I was really surprised that that was not one of the options. And I really am in favor of a write-in campaign.
There we go. I
for
agree.
that.
I think there needs
So-
to be a write-in campaign for that. I would agree with you, and especially because there's kind of a nod to what we've had at Nippert with the tarp. So I thought that was kind of cool. Overall, I mean, personally, I said I gave you my thoughts. I like the gradient navy with the blue. I don't love the big lion, the big Gary in the one side. I think it looks a little hokey, kind of like the big bat at Valencia, but I understand it. Plus the fact that, are we going to change our logo and have to change our seats? So we'll see how that goes. But guys, please, put your info on there. Put your thoughts on social media, Facebook, Twitter. What your thoughts were. Friend of the show, Kevin Wallace, put, at least we didn't have like sponsors like Corona, like at Club America in our seats. So good for you, Jeff Birding, and not going to that level. So would have loved to have seen Rhinehouse or somebody foot the bill for that, but you never know. I'm joking. All right, that was a great episode. Glad to have Nipun on here. Great to talk with all these tough topics. They're not easy to talk about. It's touchy. It's going to offend people. But guys, we're not your enemy. We're here to look at every aspect of this. You're going to get different viewpoints from all of us, and we're trying to give you as much information as possible to help shape your viewpoint. And please, disagree with us. We love that. How many times have I been yelled at by head coaches on this, in this club? So that's cool too. All right, guys, got a great show coming out this week. Don't forget to download the latest episode of Talking Tactics with Coach Brad Goff. It's going to drop very soon, tomorrow possibly, where Coach dives into what a coaching staff should be doing with a team leading up to a match game week. So go check that out. Talking Tactics with Coach Goff on your favorite podcast platform. So go check that out. Download now. Guys, it's time to wrap up the show here. We always talk about our final thoughts. Clay, you had a great show. Love to hear a little bit more about what's going on with you and what your final thoughts are going into the Memorial Day holiday weekend.
Well, thanks, Brian. I was happy to be here, and thanks again to Nipun for a great interview. I know, he's really critical of a return, and I've been kind of pessimistic or a little more harsh in that respect as well. But I do want to take a moment to just say, I'm sure a lot of our listeners might disagree with me, but I think we have to realize that we come from the same place, and we all love soccer, and we all want it to do well here. And how it comes back and what we do to make it come back and how we appreciate it when it does come back, there's going to be different ways to do it. But if we focus on what we love and what we want to achieve, I think we'll all find that we agree more than we disagree. And so I'm still just looking forward to that. Getting a little taste of Bundesliga was great, but it'll be really nice when I can have a leader of Kolsch at Mecklenburg, or cheer with the Bailey again. So I'm looking forward to doing that with all of you. Finally, my final thought. I need to take some credit on this podcast tonight. We went ahead and we mentioned that MLS is going to consider doing a tournament style to start the season, and no one said, "Oh wow, Clay, did anyone think of that? Did anyone propose a similar tournament on our own
8
website?
weeks ago.
CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. Yes, I did propose a World Cup style tournament. I think it'd be fantastic.
Royalties.
Yep. I think Don Garber owes me a call. I think I deserve a box seat. And it's, how safe it is and how we get to it, I think is important. But at the same time, I will very gladly take all the credit I can.
You're either going to get all the credit or all the hate mail. So let's just wait and see on that.
Bring it on at Clay Winstead at Twitter. Come on.
There we go. Jeff Wallner, thanks for joining us again, buddy.
Clay, I'm glad you brought that up, because I wasn't going to publicly give you credit for that, because I knew that this would happen. But I'm glad you took the initiative and gave yourself credit. So.
Yeah, love when people pat themselves on their back.
I don't need help stroking my own ego.
Yeah, right. That worked out well. But my final thought is just that tonight's show had, I won't say a negative or dark tone, but it wasn't a pleasant tone to the show. But I think that's our responsibility. We need to talk about the topics that are impacting our club, right? And we've talked about serious topics on this show before. We've talked about difficult managerial changes and other challenges that the club has had. This is much, much bigger and more important than any of that. It's impacting all of our lives. It's impacting the lives of people all over the world. So it's important that we talked about it. And honestly, I feel good that we spent some time and we kind of dove a little bit deeper into it. We kind of tapped into Nipun's knowledge on the subject. It feels good. It feels productive. I'm glad we did it. But obviously, we all would much prefer to talk about much happier topics. And hopefully next week that tone shifts in another direction and we start doing that. But I'm glad we took the time to discuss this today. And I hope that everyone that's listening appreciates that.
Yeah, Gerard, if you're listening, a head coach hire or a surprise signing would be wonderful. So that'd be great to talk about right now. No, we're very excited for this up. Still it's been. Yeah, we've been driving this CST ship through a hurricane right now and trying to navigate everything, and it's been challenging. But we're trying to do the homework and not trying to just BS through this. We're trying to give you guys as much information out there as possible. So I hope you're enjoying it. Please keep listening. It'll be a heck of a lot more fun when we can complain about which right back is better. Can't wait to do that. Or which left back is better or healthier. So those are going to be a lot of cool things to talk about.
Stray shots at Garza at the end of the podcast. Come on now.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. Guys, please feel free to check us out on CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. We got a lot going on there. There's been a little bit of a challenge for us to kind of get access to the players right now with the weekly conference calls and stuff. So we're going to do the best to keep creating content for you. So please check out the podcast as well as Coach's podcast, and we'll keep being here for you guys. So thank you so much, Nicky Soup and Sausage. You're working magic, man. You got so much stuff on there with upgrades to platforms and all that stuff. So thank you for all your hard work. I'm surprised he hasn't yelled at me yet for calling him Nicky Soup and Sausage. If anybody doesn't know, he has another podcast that he works on. Nick, you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, he works with was it JD and the Rod, Nicky Soup and Sausage?
Yes, that's my nickname given to me by Jason Davis.
It's better than Nick. It's better than Nick from Toledo.
Yeah, they originally were going to call me Dirty Toledo, and it just quickly evolved. So very thankful it went to Nicky Soup and Sausage.
It's amazing that before we started this show, I listened to Soccer Mornings with Jason Davis, and I heard Nick from Toledo call in. I would say every week, every other week. You called in quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Oh yeah, definitely.
Look how far we've come.
Well, it's so funny. We got to do this. We got to do this with our key supporters. He actually at some point in that show they gave their top callers actually kit numbers, and Nick was given a kit number. I don't know what you were. You're probably a goalkeeper kit, so probably 0 or 1 or something like that.
I don't remember what my kit number is, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Hey, that's some knowledge right there.
Yeah.
That's some knowledge right there, pal. So, all right, guys. Well, for Nicky Soup and Sausage, for Clay Winstead, for Jeff Wallner, this is Brian Weigel. Lily Weigel's not in the office right now. Threw me for a loop. But we will hopefully see you next week with the whole Memorial Day, and we'll see what news comes out. We'll keep you guys on your toes. But stay tuned to Cincinnati Soccer Talk for all your FC Cincinnati Major League Soccer news. We'll see you very soon.